Libertarian and a Republican. Welcome to Publitarian Podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. This is Ronald Johnson, Publitarian, coming at you again with another episode of Publitarian Podcast. We are up to episode number 97, and I was going to call this podcast the day after, but since I didn't get to the inauguration day, the day after, I'm more than likely going to call it the MAGA Party or the Patriot Party. And what I mean by that, obviously, I'll get into in the podcast. In the meantime, the Publitarian drink of the day is some juice with some rum in it. Very fancy. We could call it something tropical. I am reinstating the day drinking decree from 2020, where it was okay to drink during the day in 2020 because it was 2020. I do believe we're going to be extending that into 2021 as well. So cheers, everybody. Anyway, on with the show. And of course, dear comrades, I would like to welcome you all to the USSA. That's the United States of Socialist America. Or, I mean, we could call ourselves, the BRA, the Banana Republic of America. Either way, I thought I would just go ahead and get in tune with our tech overlords and our resistance, quote-unquote, on the left. I've said this before on my podcast, but if big tech, all of the media, all of the celebrities, all of academia, all of big, giant, large, soul-sucking corporations are on your side, you're not a part of the resistance. You're a part of the future of the USSA. So enjoy. It's funny, all these leftists and what Lenin would call useful idiots are expecting like this cutesy European-style socialism that's going to be coming soon to the United States. Because, I mean, look around the world. There's socialism, right? No, there really isn't. Well, none that are successful. People love to look at the Denmark and the Swedens of the world and call that examples of successful socialism, where if you just dig past the surface of what we're telling you in the United States, what our media and what our academia is telling you, if you dig just even a little bit into the surface, you see that that's not the case. Even the Prime Minister of the Economics Minister, to be precise, of Denmark has come out and said, hey, we're not a socialist country. Stop calling us socialists. Finland's healthcare system is collapsing. People are resigning over it. But Finland was also called the happiest place in the world on these like old stuff from the 60s that gets peddled around. It's still called the happiest place in the world. No, Finland's number one in alcohol-related murder and antidepressant use. If not number one, they're close to the top. Look those statistics up if you don't believe me. Number one in alcohol-related murder and triple homicide. Yeah, the happiest place in the world. You don't hear the not successes of what they would call socialism. Those countries usually would describe themselves as some kind of market economy or something like that. But the academics and the media of the left side of the aisle in the United States try to refer to it as socialism, and good examples of socialism. So make no mistake, socialism is the government control of the means and production. If that's not going on, you don't have socialism. And that's what the higher-ups and the left are pushing for. They're pushing for government and, it'll probably be corporate control of the means and production. And we have kind of a unique blend in America, and I've talked about this before, where everybody's pointing fingers. The left is going, it's big evil corporations, and the right is going, no, it's big evil businesses, big evil government. And people like me in the middle are going, yeah, it's just big. Big is your problem. It's big this and big that. And it's like the most horrible marriage ever. And the left is still calling this, late stage capitalism and all this other stuff to make it sound like the idea or the existence of a free market capitalistic system is on life support and needs to be killed. While the free market capitalistic system is on life support, it's It's not through the fault of its own. It's being strangulated. It's got the government and big corporations picking winners and losers. Don't believe me? Try to start a business and look at how many obstacles from big corporations to the heavy hand of local and large government. Look how many obstacles will be in your way to even start a business. Watch how many people have their hands out ready to either take money, power, something away from you. And that's what we're dealing with right now. So before the lefties start to take a victory lap over the successes of socialism, I didn't mean to talk about this on the podcast. Here I go. I'm off my notes and I'm just like blabbing again. Just look at the defense budgets of these other countries versus the defense budget of the United States. These other countries can flirt and experiment with what you're calling socialism because the United States is picking up a lot of the tab. Same thing with the old climate accord, the Paris Climate Accord. The same thing with the defense budgets of these countries versus the defense budgets of the United States. You guys know we're picking up the tab for their defense, right? If you take defense out of your budget and you have all that money freed up, sure, you can experiment with socialism or whatever you want. But remember that somebody else is paying the price for you to experiment with socialism. And we're going to run out of money sooner or later. We can't, and that's... was it Margaret Thatcher that said the problem with socialism is sooner or later you run out of other people's money? Well, these other countries are. They're going to run out of the United States money soon because the United States is out of money. The United States is the economic beacon and engine that runs all this, that keeps these totalitarian or the countries that want to flirt with totalitarianism. It's the beacon and the engine that keeps it running. And the engine's running out of gas because we're not putting fuel in the tank. We're just, spending money we don't have and flirting with poisonous ideologies that have historically enslaved and killed millions of people. And we're still told, oh, no, they just didn't get it right. They just didn't quite get it right. And, okay, well, how many more bodies? How many more bodies is it going to take for you philosopher kings to have what you want? And real socialism hasn't been tried in America. Yes, it has. The very first founding, William Bradford's journal, The Pilgrims. Read about what they originally tried from his writings. He tried a form of socialism. It was the first thing he tried when he set foot on here. Okay, we all just need to throw into the pot. Everybody will be equal. Yeah, it was a disaster. It didn't work. That's what caused them to starve. I mean, the fiction is that they were just poor idiots and the Native Americans had to come bail them out. There's a kernel of truth to that, but it's not the total story. Once William Bradford started engaging in property rights to people and saying, hey, this is yours. If you work this long, this is yours, and nobody can tell you that it's not yours, and you can do whatever you want with this land, yada, yada. And then once people started working for themselves and causing them and their family to thrive, then the colony flourished. Anyway, speaking of socialists and the working class and the workers, because that's what socialism does, communism does, it pits the producers against the workers. And there's no better example of the poor, downtrodden workers than the labor unions. And guess what? The labor unions endorsed Biden for president. The plumbers and pipe fitters, the gas and oil workers, they all endorsed Biden. And now Biden is pulling the plug on the Keystone XL pipeline that was going to give all these people work and jobs in the future. And more importantly, give us some energy independence and keep our gas prices low. And spoiler alert, I knew this was going to happen. And so did anybody else with any common sense. Biden is pulling plug on the Keystone. Now the union workers are going to be out of work. But I bet their bosses are still going to get paid and have a job. One of my lefty friends in very recent history told me that how unions are good because they look out for the little guy, and I would just like for them to revisit that if possible. Any entity that stays on the books long enough will live long enough to be the villain, and that's what unions are. They started off as a way to balance the power between these monopolistic corporations in the turn of the 20th century, to where it was either all or nothing with the workers. The unions could bargain with the people, and then it only took so long, once that started evening out, for the unions to start getting in bed with political parties and the people that run the company. In other words, the enemies that they were fighting against to begin with. And so now all these unions, I've had friends on the podcast that were in teachers' unions. Typically unions, they may negotiate better prices for you, but price versus cost, like what it's actually going to cost you in the long run, is very detrimental, in my humble opinion. So yeah, any of these companies, any of these entities, if they live long enough, they'll become the villain. Because power over time corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think that was Lord Acton that said that. But the title of the podcast, I'm just going to call it the MAGA Party or Patriot Party. And the reason being is I had this kind of tongue-in-cheek on social media last week because I was kind of feeling what everybody else was feeling. And now I'm seeing it gain traction. I was saying, hey, why don't we just start the MAGA Party? Why don't we just start the Patriot Party? And it looks like that idea got passed around. And, of course, obviously I'm not the only one that had that idea. There's other people that have come up with that as well. I'm going to give you the pros and cons of that because it may sound like a good emotional, idea to make this massive kind of exodus. So let me give you both sides of the issue, and then I'll tell you what I think about it. I'll give you some historical perspectives for both arguments. For one, unless we are planning like an almost 100% mass exodus from the Republican Party, it would be extremely difficult for it to be successful if that's the case. It's just a numbers game, because I've heard other podcasts talk about this too, but we're not like a parliamentarian style of government here. We are a representative republic, but the people that we elect are still elected on popular vote. Our representatives, except for the president, obviously. If you mathematically do the numbers, if somebody were to start a third party, which has been tried with libertarianism, the Constitution Party, and if you say, well, Ronald, I haven't heard of the Constitution Party, there you go. Case dismissed. It's hard to get traction with these third parties. Now, if I'm doing my math, which, I'm not a math wizard, it would take a almost 100% mass exodus from the Republican Party to make this thing mathematically work, which I guess could happen because there's a lot of Republicans that are fed up with the leadership. And it's been like that not just for years, it's been like that for decades. You can go all the way back to Ross Perot in 1992. And I wasn't in the political realm yet, but he got a lot of traction as a third party because he was saying, the left is lying to you, the right isn't doing what you want them to do. It was when NAFTA was a thing, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which was disastrous. He was the only one out front going, hey, this thing sucks. It's going to kill business. It's going to send all of our work to China and Mexico. And hey, look at that. Look what happened decades later. All of our work went to China and Mexico. But the globalists, I'm not going to say it like Alex Jones, the globalists, that is a thing. There is people that want, global interests over the interests of sovereign countries. I mean, just calling them globalists, it makes you sound like some kind of, crackpot conspiracy theorist. But that is real. It's evidenced by the laws that continue to be passed. But anyway, so Perot was one of the forefathers of this, and he did garner a lot of votes. But once you start doing the math, he didn't have any kind of path to victory, and so he was done. And that's what I'm worried about with this. Another example was in 1912. The conservative vote was split with a new party between Taft and Roosevelt. And Roosevelt was trying to, start this new kind of, patriotic, right-wing thing. Kind of sounds familiar, right? Well, the electoral count ended up being 435 to 88 in favor of Woodrow Wilson, one of the worst American presidents to ever get elected. And then, of course, Woodrow Wilson went on to further the cause of, globalism and one world stuff, even back then. And he got elected because of that. Now, if the Republican Party would have stayed united, perhaps Woodrow Wilson wouldn't have had the electoral votes to do that. But if you look at percentages, that's a lot to overcome. And you know how much percentage of the vote Woodrow Wilson got? 41%. So he didn't even get over 50% of the vote. He only got 41% because the other side of the party was split. Do you see how the math works out? The left and the right is about a 40-40 split right now. Anything that happens to the Republican Party, combined with the already rampant voter fraud that's happening on the left, will give us, I think, zero path to victory. Like I said, 40% of the vote, and Woodrow Wilson became the president. And as always, we vote in rhinos, and that's one of the things why people are frustrated and they want to start this new party. Man, at this time, they didn't even wait to put their names on their desk before they turned around and started selling us out, including, as much as it pains me to say this, Dan Crenshaw, that I helped get elected. Just a pro tip, we need to stop using military service as some kind of proving factor for them being a good candidate. Because, the guy did good things in the military, and then I'm sure John McCain did too. And the thing about the military that people don't know, I keep going off on all these rabbit trails today, but the thing about the military, once you get past a certain rank and you start going to brass and up, like any kind of commanding officer, that they're all liberals, they're all ideologues, they're all leftists. I have this from very good sources, and also I don't even have to have sources. Look at Lieutenant Colonel Vindman during the Trump impeachment scam. Look at all these generals that have turned their back and in favor of globalism and endless wars and the what the left calls the military-industrial complex. Just look at them; they're all in favor of it. So what does that tell you? I mean, that's evidence as far as I'm concerned. But before I go off on a rabbit trail, let me be fair and give you the other side of the Patriot Party, MAGA Party movement. Now, there is historical precedence for a new party being formed and it being successful. So don't think that I'm all doom and gloom here. I'm just giving you both sides of the argument. One is a mathematical one where I don't see the path unless there is a massive, massive exodus from the Republican Party, which I guess could happen. But here's the key factor. Here's where it could be successful because we have historical precedent for it. There were two big parties in the 1850s. You had the Democrats, which this is going to come a shock to you, any of my Democrat listeners. The Democrats were the ones that were in favor of slavery. The Democrats were the ones that started the KKK. The Democrats are the ones that voted against the Civil Rights Act. And yes, the Democrat Civil Rights Act was signed into law by LBJ. But before you lefties take a victory lap on LBJ signing that bill, he didn't want to sign that bill, and then he also gave us the Great Society, which made a lot of African Americans enslaved to the welfare system. So the Democrat Party has had a long history of racism and slavery. That's just a cute little side note. Anyway, we're going back to the 1850s. You have two political parties in America that have the most traction. You've got the Democrats and you've got the Whigs. There were attempts over the years to form another political party for the abolition of slavery, but they could never get people to just 100% commit to it. Not many Democrats felt comfortable signing on to it, and then the Whigs just didn't want to make any of the people that were in favor of slavery, like the big people that, owned the land and had the money, didn't really want to upset their constituency and rock the boat. And so a few different attempts were made at trying to start like an anti-slavery party with other concessions, and it just didn't work. And then finally, this political party coalesced together and said, okay, we're just going to 100% be about the abolition of slavery. All the other issues we can fight about later, but this is what we need to do right now. This is the right thing to do. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was how the Republican Party was born. Yes, the Republican Party, the evil, racist Republican Party that you get told about through media and academia is actually the party that was formed solely for the purpose of abolishing slavery. That third party was formed. It started gaining more and more traction. It had that one core issue that most people really did believe in. And then there was people from the Democrat side that came over as well. And the Republican Party was born from that. So historically, the lesson is that it can happen. But not only would you need a mass exodus from the current Republican Party, I think you would also need a bunch of MPAs, libertarians, and some Democrats as well. Now, I know there were a lot of Democrats that voted for Trump and that feel disenfranchised. There's a lot of ultra-left-wing Bernie bros that feel disenfranchised by the Democrat Party never delivering for them on their crazy left-wing stuff. But still, they're not being delivered on. They're not being taken seriously. So is there enough to start another party like that? Maybe. So there's I wanted to give you guys both sides of the argument. There's historical precedent for both. But I do think, to go back to my earlier analogy, that the Republican Party has lived long enough to become the villain. There's always stories of a good guy that started off with good intentions and ends up being the bad guy. And I think that's where the Republican Party is at now. The Republican Party, it's really a uniparty right now. There's not really a huge difference between them. And anybody on the Republican Party that's a rhino, that means Republican in name only, that votes with the left, that votes for, Trump's sham impeachment and all this other stuff, it gives you evidence that the party needs to get taken in a different direction. And then if you question it, and you use the word patriot, well, now you're a domestic terrorist. So we're really just going into dangerous times, because I do think a new party should be formed, but I don't know if it's too late for the new party to be formed. And I've heard a billion different opinions from a billion different podcasters on this. Some podcasters say, no, we just need to keep voting out the rhinos. Okay, well, we've been doing that for decades. And then ones that aren't rhinos become rhinos. Marco Rubio is a huge example of this. He started off with being like Mr. Constitution when he got voted in. He's one of my guys, a Florida senator. And when I would listen to his speeches back in the Obama era, I was like, dude, this guy is the real deal. And then he gets up there, he gets quiet, he starts signing on to amnesty, he becomes the Gang of Eight, and he fades off into the darkness, and he's, just a part of the establishment now. So that's the problem. We can keep voting in non-rhinos, but once they get to that swamp known as DC, once they get to that city, and they're seeing all the opportunities that can be afforded to them, it's really hard for somebody to say no to that kind of money and that kind of power. So maybe a new political party is the answer. I'm just telling you for it to mathematically work, it would have to be everybody signing on to it and a massive, massive exodus. And then if we do that, be prepared to be labeled as, conspirators, domestic terrorists, all this other stuff, just simply for the idea of wanting to stick up for your country. Speaking of sticking up for your country, I saw in the news where Brandon Straka, the guy that started the Walk Away movement, gay hairdresser in New York, started his own movement called Walk Away, and it was so effective at red-pilling Democrats that he became an enemy. And he is now, he just got arrested because he was a part of the Capitol Hill riots. Now, the thing where it gets murky is he was not a part of the assault on the Capitol building. He was just there the day that he was just one of the speakers there the day that Trump spoke. But because he was unapologetic about the stances that he took, he got arrested. That should scare everybody, left or right. Just being arrested, allegedly now, for just words that he said that were not violent words or not from anything that I can see in the speech. So we're getting really into murky times, and as much as I've tried over the years of doing this podcast to keep it kind of like lighthearted and humorous, I'm finding it harder and harder to do as time marches on. So that's happening, and then also I just want to address the Q stuff with everybody real quick. QAnon, the conspiracy theory group, they're still doubling and tripling down that all this is part of the plan, and the military is going to intervene, and Trump is going to be president in March, and they just keep moving the goalposts. So I'm going to tell anybody that's still subscribing to this movement, just stop, walk away from it. Because here's the deal. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Q is real. Well, if they really do have all this power, and there really is a plan, and there really is all this influence, then you following it or not following it isn't going to make a difference. It's just going to happen. So what I think this is, and what I thought it was back in 2018, is either just some kind of live-action role play, or it's something that's being cooked up to keep people either ignorant or silent or complicit. So I would just urge anybody to stop trying to do the quirky math and make all the Q stuff make sense. It's just, it's not there for your benefit. If frickin' Alex Jones thinks Q is kooky, then there's your answer. A little bit of a lighter note on Kamala Harris's swearing in as vice president. I would like to point out that even Justice Sonia Sotomayor pronounced her name incorrectly, but that's not a problem. It's only a problem if the right mispronounces her name. So I'm not going to revisit the Kamala Harris name. I know, Kamala Harris, name debacle again. And just in, Amazon doesn't want mail-in voting. That's right. This is not Clown World. This is actually happening. This is from the Epic Times. It's also in Breitbart and a bunch of other news outlets as well. Amazon trying to block voting by mail in unionization election. Amazon is seeking to block mail-in votes in an upcoming unionization votes. Workers at a warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, are scheduled to vote soon on whether to unionize, with ballots being sent out on February 8th. So what's happening is they said, we're worried about COVID, so let's just send out mail-in ballots so the union workers can vote. And I shit you not, from an Amazon spokesperson, quote, "We believe that the best approach to a valid, fair, and successful election is one that is conducted manually, in person." No shit. You don't say. You're not suggesting that voting by mail could create some sort of fraud or irregularity, could you? Anyway, I've got an episode coming up on that too, because the only two prominent conservative voices that aren't using the words voter fraud, quote unquote, one is a podcaster, Allie Beth Stuckey, who's just a never-Trumper to begin with. So she, I'm sure, was doing cartwheels since he left office. And then a surprising one is Michael Knowles. He's on the Daily Wire. He's, with one of Shapiro's group. Kind of surprised to hear that from him, because he's kind of more even-handed. But I will lay out all the cases that are out there because of voter fraud. Matter of fact, Rand Paul did an interview yesterday on with Jake Tapper. And was it Jake Tapper, or was it one of the other CNN clowns? Anyway, I can't remember, but he was sitting there trying to get Rand Paul to say the words like voter fraud. I just need to hear from you. I just need to hear you say that there was no voter fraud. And I mean, talk about gaslighting. And of course, Rand Paul wouldn't do it. And he was like, "I will start giving you examples. I will start giving you court cases." And they're like, and so the reporter cut him off, and he was like, "No, there was no voter fraud." And so Rand Paul went in again. He was like, "Every one of these court cases didn't didn't take the case because of evidence. They took it because of standing. And the reason he explained that is courts generally don't like to get in the middle of election stuff. I guess they feel it's like out of their purview. He was like, but none of them rejected it because of evidence. 99.99% of the courts never even saw the evidence. So the evidence wasn't even presented to them. But we're all just supposed to, just throw up our hands and go home and go, oh, well, Trump lost, get over it. So I am going to be doing an episode on that, too, because I always tease about voter fraud. And I'm going to go through a couple of the Navarro report and a couple of the places it shows in actual court standings, documents, no conspiracy theory stuff, where actually voter fraud and irregularity had occurred. But that will be for another episode. And I think that will do it for this edition of Publitarian Podcast. If you want to reach out to me, you can. I'm publitarian@protonmail.com. I am on Instagram still. I am on all the other social medias. I'm really active on Gab as of late, since Parler is still down. The rumor mill about that is that Parler didn't grab their code from the Amazon web server before Amazon shut them down. So maybe they won't be back anytime soon. But I've also heard from Parler's people that that's erroneous. So who knows? So we'll wait to see what happens with that. But anyway, yeah, if you cross big tech, man, they make sure that you are deplatformed. But yeah, left, keep calling yourselves a resistance. You're really resisting. Keep hanging in with your big government and big corporate allies, and keep being a useful idiot until you're not useful anymore, and then that will be a problem. Anyway, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Publitarian Podcast. Have a good one.
Listening to Publitarian Podcast. Copyright 2021.